Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode you're about to hear. Just wanted to give a heads up that we also have a special bonus mini episode over at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato, where we discuss some recent Superman news announced in the lead up to and during San Diego Comic-Con. It's available for all of my Patreon members, both free and paid. I hope you'll check it out. And speaking of San Diego Comic-Con, very shortly after we recorded our episode on My Adventures with Superman Season 2, some Season 3 news dropped at Comic-Con. Most notably, we are getting what appears to be a very Connor Kent-looking Superboy joining the show. Additionally, the producers confirmed that Kara will remain a part of the show, this new quartet that's formed at the end of the season. And artwork showcasing the villains of the series seemingly revealed a bald Lex, Mxyzptlk, and perhaps even Cyborg Superman? We'll, of course, keep an eye on all of this as Season 3 unfolds in the future, and when the time comes, we'll be here to talk about all of it. In the meantime, here is our discussion on My Adventures with Superman Season 2. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss My Adventures with Superman Season 2 is returning guest Josh Marowitz. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I feel much more together this time than I did last time. Sleep deprived from a 1-month-old baby. Now I'm only sleep deprived from an 8-month-old baby.
Yeah, you were here during the holiday season last year. We did a holiday special. You joined me to talk about Superman Peace on Earth. And yes, you had a newborn, your second child at home, and you were a champ and you did it. And it was a lot of fun. I don't know that we'll do a holiday special this year because we've been working real hard with all these Superboy episodes. And I think when we're all done with that and we have our fall run, which won't be Superboy related, but once we're done with all that, I think we'll maybe just kind of sign off and take a breather for a few weeks. But no, that conversation was a lot of fun and I'm glad to have you back. And I appreciate you really jumped in on relatively short notice for this. I want to give a shout out to our pal, comic book artist V. Ken Mary, and he joined me for Season 1. And he was going to come back to talk about Season 2, and I posted about it and everything, but he had a personal matter to attend to, and so I had an opening, and I thought of you, and I appreciate you jumping on board so quickly with this.
I'm always happy to be someone's second choice.
But as soon as there was an opening, you were the first person I thought of, so there's something to be said for that. And this was Ken.
I'm the first second choice. I kid, but I'm flattered. I'm flattered you remembered I watched the show, that I really, really liked the show. I'm flattered to be thought of.
Right on. So yeah, this animated series here, My Adventures with Superman, airs on Adult Swim and then streams on Max. And last year we talked about Season 1, those first 10 episodes, and now we have another batch of 10 episodes to discuss here. You might have noticed, folks, I said this is Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. This is the first of 2 interludes in our ongoing Superboy coverage. Next week, we're going to be talking about Superman House of Brainiac, the recently concluded comic book event. I already recorded that one. It's a lot of fun. I think people will enjoy it. And then we'll get back into our Superboy coverage. But I wanted to press pause on that just to kind of check in with what's going on in the world of Superman animation and comics. And I had, as the audience might recall, such a great time watching the first season of My Adventures with Superman. Such a fresh take on the character, really mining their personalities, those interpersonal dynamics, the romance. I was actually on another podcast recently, shout out to Elseworld, and Chris asked me what I think the freshest take on Superman is currently. And my first answer was My Adventures with Superman. Did you have a similar experience with Season 1? You were a fan?
Definitely. And, I wasn't going to watch it. I was one of those people. Here again, a great example of I was so wrong. I saw the promo images. I said, oh, it's anime. It's not for me. And then they posted, what did they post the first 2 episodes on YouTube, like right when it premiered? Or was it just the first episode?
Oh, I totally forgot about that. I don't know.
Cartoon Network posted on YouTube. I said, well, it's free. It's here. It's legal. I'm just going to do it. And I just loved it. I didn't love everything about it, but I loved the way they did Clark and Lois and Jimmy so much that any other quibble I have with it, whatever, it just doesn't matter because they get those characters. And it's so nice to see in a media adaptation that they actually get those characters and get them so well. I was stunned that they had me as quickly and as thoroughly as they had me, and it's just a terrific show.
Yeah.
Anyone who, like me, was saying like, "Oh, it's not for me. Oh, it looks so modern. Oh, they're so young." And whatever complaints I see all the time on Facebook groups populated by older, usually gentlemen, I would encourage them to rethink it and give it a second chance, because it is a phenomenal show.
Couldn't agree more. I think you and I had very similar experiences. I was similarly skeptical at the outset, and it immediately won me over, and I had such a great time with it. And you really get the sense, and this applies to both seasons, that there's a lot of love and care for Clark himself, but that entire world, that entire supporting cast from the people making it. And I said this with season 1. It's true again here, that there's almost no wasted character, right? Like anyone who pops up, even if it's in a minor role, usually is someone with some connection to the world of Superman. And I love that they're just sprinkling in all of these characters, whether it's just kind of a quick one-off or then blossom into a larger, more prominent player down the line. So there's so much about it that I really do enjoy. So at the outset of this episode, I want to say, first of all, there will be spoilers. The season just concluded. We will be talking about it. So here's your spoiler warning. And also, again, I'm a fan of this show. And if for people who really loved the second season, I don't want anything that I'm going to say to take away from that. And I don't want to make this sound like, oh my God, he hated the season. I enjoyed it overall. I had a good time watching it. But there were a number of problems I had with this season that I didn't with the first season. So I will be honest, it was a little bit of a letdown for me this time around. There are a few things that are just a matter of preference. Like I wouldn't have done it that way, but it's not my show. So that's not a critique. It's just like, it wasn't to my taste. But then there were a few things that I did really find to be problematic that kind of hindered my enjoyment of the season. So overall, this doesn't rise to the level of the first season for me, the way that I wanted it to. But again, for people who were just like in love with this season, awesome. And I don't want to take away from that. So I guess kind of on that note, I mean, we'll get into all the specifics, but just that overall feeling, that overall impression, how did you like season 2?
I started season 2. I thought this is great, that they're really living up to season 1. And then about halfway through, I thought, okay, yeah, I like it. When season 2 is good, it's as good as season 1. It's just not as good as often, I guess is a nice way to say it. There were a few episodes near the end. I thought, well, if we're only getting 10 episodes, do we really need to be spending the time here with this to this degree? I didn't think so. But like you say, I love the show. I want to reiterate, emphasize that I love the show. I only complain because I love it so much. If it weren't worth watching every episode of, I would have stopped watching it, and I would have gone to read one of the thousands of other comics I've not read before, or watched the Superboy show that I still haven't read, even though I've been listening to you talk about it the last few weeks. So it's good enough to watch, but yeah, it doesn't reach those highs of season 1.
All right. At least it wasn't just me, but yeah, we'll get into it. We'll break it all down. It's funny though, because I was looking forward to this recording. I was looking forward to talking to you and comparing notes, but there was a part of me that's like, oh man, like I don't like, there's no part of me that takes delight in being like, oh, I'm going to say all the things I didn't like about it. It's like, oh, damn it. Like I really, I don't want to be in that position. I'm going to try, anytime I say something I didn't like, I'm going to try to point out something I did like. Cause I really do want to make this clear. There's a lot I liked about this, but again, some of the problems I had were really fundamental. And the other thing too, this is both a compliment and a criticism. I expect a lot from the show because I know what the show is capable of, right?
That's right.
Like it's a cartoon and it's quote unquote all ages in the sense there's no graphic nudity or violence or anything like that, but it is a more mature show. It is a sophisticated show and it is mining these characters' personal lives in a way you typically don't see in a cartoon. And so I know what they can do. And so there were instances here where I'm like, come on guys, like you could do better than that.
And they did it in season 1. You know what they can do because they did it. And here, they just didn't quite do it. as well. And I'd really like to know why. Was it some kind of network interference? Was it they really used up all their best ideas in season one? I don't know. I comfort myself in how well Clark is done throughout the whole season. Even when everyone around him, I think, oh, why are you behaving this way? Why did the writers do it a way I thought maybe they could have done better? Clark is so Clark. And I'd watch a worse season if Clark could be as good as he's been in the last, these last 20 episodes.
No, right on. So you and I talked, I think we'll kind of look at our main cast of characters and their arcs, and that will kind of guide us. But just to kind of give context, again, I'm assuming most people listening to this, you've watched the season, but for anyone who hasn't, or if you're coming to this episode years later and you're like, what the hell are you guys talking about? So I would say in this season, there were at least 3 sort of tent poles to the overall story. So there's this breakdown in communication between Clark and Lois, who are early on in this new relationship. On Clark's side, he loses the sole connection that he has to his homeworld when AI Jor-El dies, so to speak, in that first episode. But before he does, Jor-El tells Clark that his cousin, Kara Zor-El, is out there. And if Clark obtains this Kryptonian beacon device, which of course Clark ultimately will, he'll be able to track Kara down. So you have Clark navigating that, the loss of his remaining connection to his homeworld, but the possibility, the promise of another one being out there. Lois, for her part, is navigating her complicated relationship with and history with her father, General Sam Lane, who is imprisoned by Amanda Waller at the beginning of the season until Lois and Clark break him out, and he ends up having, I would say, quite a humorous stay living with Clark and Jimmy in their apartment. That's the sort of the Lois and Clark piece of it. We have Amanda Waller, again, continuing to plan for the day when Superman needs to be taken down. And so we see all of her maneuvering and her machinations, aligning herself with a young Lex Luthor, or Luthor in this iteration. They do go by Lex Luthor, so we'll honor that pronunciation. And eventually she's able to get the Pentagon and Star Labs on board as well. So you have this faction kind of all working together to make these plans and preparations should they need to utilize them against Superman. And then it ultimately builds to this confrontation with our final boss of the season. We saw at the end of season 1 that there was this Kryptonian conqueror out there. And it was an open question at the end of season 1. Are we in Brainiac territory, Zod, someone else? We didn't really know. As we find out, it is Brainiac, and it's a Brainiac who has brainwashed Kara Zor-El and functioned as her surrogate father and has used her to commit these atrocities across the galaxy as Brainiac has embarked on his conquest. It's a Brainiac, and we'll talk more about this, that's kind of Brainiac. It's akin to Superman the Animated Series in that it's a Kryptonian creation, this Kryptonian program that then goes awry, but he doesn't have the typical motivation that we usually see from Brainiac. There are shades of Zod, but even there, it's not fully Zod either. So it's kind of this weird blend, but also kind of its own thing. But again, I would say those are kind of the main tent poles of the season. Is there anything that I left out that we'd be remiss not including at this outset?
No, those were the tent poles. I thought it was Zod at the end of season 1. I thought, oh, we're going to go Zod now. Okay, cool. And then when it was Brainiac, I was like, oh, I was surprised. The show's done it to me over the 20 episodes now a few times where I think, oh, I know just where they're going. Okay, I got it. Yeah, I've read Superman since 97. I know a lot about it. And then it does something with all the mythology and the lore and everything. And I think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, that's new. So even in instances where, as you said, I wouldn't have done it that way, I thought the same. I wouldn't have done it that way, but I'm thrilled that somebody is doing it in a different way, because the way I would do it is the way I've been reading it for 27 years, the way I've been thinking about it for 27 years, and they're doing it in a way that I wouldn't have thought of. So at least I'm seeing a different take, something new. I guess that's the positive spin I could put on some of their choices. I'm at least intrigued with how they were thinking about it.
Fair enough. And you know what, as you're saying, I'm smiling, I'm laughing because I think it is one of those things. I bet if it did totally match up with my expectations and what I would do. I'd probably be sitting here being like, it's so predictable. Couldn't they do anything different?
Right. That's how I would be saying it.
Oh,
we've seen this before. This is the animated series. They're just doing it again.
I know. You know, I'm really glad you're here because you're sitting there in your Electric Superman sweatshirt. You've got your Electric Superman poster behind you. And I know that you said you started reading in 97. You got into reading Superman with the Electric Superman saga. So
that was my first issue.
We had hints of this in the first season, but they really ramp it up in the second season here, where Superman has this aura that he's able to extend, and we see it in a number of instances. For example, when he saves Silas Stone from that explosion early on, where he's able to kind of extend this field around whoever or whatever he's trying to protect, and we get not really much of an explanation for it. I mean, I think he just kind of posits exactly what I just said. Like when he needs to, he's able to kind of do this. But visually, it looks like Electric Superman. I mean, what was your reaction to that as you're seeing that?
I'm thrilled by that visual, and there's a lot of visual, even forgetting the sparks or lightning that happens even from the first episode of season 1. In this season, there are a lot of moments where there's like a blob of electricity, like when he's dropped into the Black Mercy universe, he's kind of like lightninged down into it, and I thought, oh, that seems like the way he would fly. And the Superman Blue fanboy in me was just giddy at all of the possibilities. The what did they call it? The field.
Yeah, biofield or aura. I mean,
I thought they called it something, but now I don't remember. But that made me think of All-Star Superman and him saving the ship. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't get too excited as a Superman Blue fanboy about this one because he did that in All-Star Superman. Maybe they're pulling that moment from that story. But boy, there is a lot when Brainiac tells Kara, like, oh, he can do that, or like, oh, he's different. Don't kill him anymore because he's doing some kind of electric something. I thought, oh, there is something to this. I guess we could get into like our hopes for season 3, but like my number one hope for season 3 is that they give us Superman Blue in that universe.
Me too. I feel like this show is primed for it. I think it would fit clearly. I mean, he's got something going on different with his powers, and that could just evolve into the electric powers, and that's something new for him to contend with. If we go so far as Superman Red, Superman Blue, and he splits while he's in this relationship with Lois, that complicates matters. I mean, we've talked about this when we talked about Superman the Animated Series. That clearly it was a very conscious choice to not reflect the comics of the time, right? This was in the late 90s. They could have done Doomsday. They could have done Electric Superman. Like there's so much they could have pulled from the comics, but they did it. And I respect that choice. And it ends up being something, that show really, there's, I think, a very timeless quality to it. It doesn't feel like, oh yeah, they're just trying to reflect what's going on in the books. At the same time, like it would have been cool to see some of those things. And so I do feel like maybe there's a possibility here. So we'll see. And it has been renewed for season 3. And I believe when it aired on Adult Swim, there was a little stinger at the end that said season 3 in production. But kind of on that note about it airing, we have a couple of questions from one of our patrons. Shout out to Brian Dempsey. Brian says, I consume all my broadcast TV through streaming, and I have for many years, so this doesn't impact me. But I find the show airing at midnight on Adult Swim to be an odd choice. It's very family friendly, both in content and style. Do you think they're missing out on viewers and better numbers because of this choice? Or is everyone just finding it on Max, with broadcast having little to no meaning these days, or cable? What do you, because I know you watch the next day on Max with your daughter, right?
I watch it on iTunes. So I plunked down money for the season.
Oh, good man. Yeah. Really? Yeah. Man, is really supporting this.
And when I did my rewatch, when you asked me to do this, I did on Max to give them the counts.
Wow.
So I'm really doing all I can do to support this show. No, I wake up at 6 a.m. most days. I take the baby who starts crying. The minute my eyes open in my own bed, she starts crying because she senses that I've opened my eyes and she's ready for daddy cuddles. And I take her upstairs to my man attic, and we load up iTunes on the Apple TV, and I put on my headphones and I watch it while she sleeps on me. So I don't know that she would have enjoyed it anymore at midnight or at 6 a.m. But no, I think he's made a good point. It is a family friendly enough show in the greatest sense of that term. It's not like family friendly safe, but it's not family friend. It's not overly saccharine and it's not overly gory or anything. It's a truly all ages show, not a young ages show, an all ages show. I'm sure there'd be kids who would like to see a Superman show. I don't know what they're holding back. At the same time, I worry that if they were thinking, okay, we'll put this on Saturday mornings for the kids, that maybe the writing would skew a little more towards them. And by putting on at midnight, they can tell their corporate overlords, no, this is a sophisticated show. We're airing it at midnight. Maybe that's how they're keeping themselves safe.
That's a great point. I think there might be something to that. And also, and obviously Brian brought this up. It's like, I don't know. Would even if this were on Cartoon Network in the morning, would kids be watching it there? Or it's like, if they're going to watch it at all, would it just be on streaming? Are they even going to sit down and watch the full episode? Or for any kids who are consuming this, are they watching 7 to 15 second clips of this on TikTok and Reels? It's like, I don't know. So
I don't know how any of that works yet. My kids aren't old enough to understand their media consumption habits.
Yeah, but the midnight airing is a little odd to me, I think, for an animated series in particular, especially one that, again, is not like full on for adults. But it is what it is. And then Brian also asks, there was a DVD release of season 1. Did anyone pick up a physical copy? He said, I already got my money's worth. My 3-year-old grandson found it on my TV stand and asked to watch it. So that's awesome. I mean, you've bought it on. Did you also buy the DVD? Or you draw the line at that? You've bought it enough.
There. My wife is on me about the number of books I have already and the figures and the Lego and everything else. I've got to say, okay, I don't need the physical media. If one day they take it off of iTunes, even though I've bought it, and if they take it off of Max, there's other ways to get things. So I'm not too worried about the show disappearing, and I don't need to own the physical copy if it will make my wife angry at me.
Gotcha. See, this is why you got to start a podcast, because then you go, that's for the podcast, and I got to get it. I actually, though, did not buy the DVD because it's 2024. What are we doing with the DVD? Give me a 4K or at least a Blu-ray. That was one thing. I'm like, I would be happy to purchase a copy and have it on my shelf, but I'm not going to watch it in lower resolution than what I'm seeing on Max. Right. Like, what am I doing here?
You know, when he asked the question, I didn't even think that he said DVD. I just interpreted that as a physical disc.
No, it's literally DVD.
I didn't even think of DVD. Okay.
And I looked at it, I was like, I said, it can't just be DVD, but it is. By the way, they recently announced that there's going to be a complete series collection of Super Friends.
Yes.
And first, I only saw the DVD, and I was like, okay, I'll get that. That's totally fine. But there's actually going to be a Blu-ray of it as well.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, I've already pre-ordered the DVD. I'm going to go cancel that and get the Blu-ray.
Cancel that. I don't know if the listing is up yet. I don't know, but yeah, okay. there is going to be a Blu-ray. So I would love a Blu-ray or a 4K of this. The DVD only is a little bit like, come on. All right. As far as the season itself here that we're talking about, let me just get this out of my system. The thing that bothered me the most, other than the brainwashing and the evil Superman, which we've seen done to death, or not even evil Superman, possessed Superman, when Brainiac takes over his body, it's like, really?
We've seen enough of that too. Yeah.
Other than that, though, the communication issues that Lois and Clark undergo here, the tension that we're asked to buy between Lois and Clark, and then later, to a lesser extent, but it's there, between Clark and Jimmy. And that tension is kind of critical to the season. A lot hinges on it because those memories, those experiences create the doubt that Brainiac is then later able to exploit when Clark is under the Black Mercy. So it is important. And what bothered me is we have multiple episodes early in the season where Clark, episode after episode, is like, Lois, we got to talk, right? Because he's gotten this news from Jor-El that his cousin is out there. He's got to get this beacon. And eventually he does get the beacon and he's deciding whether and when to use it. And he wants to talk to her about this. In fairness, she's got her own stuff going on with Sam and they both lead very busy lives. But episode after episode, it's like, Lois, we got to talk. Oh, I'm busy. Let's talk later. And they don't connect. And I don't want to be too hard on the show or too hard on the characters, but they talk so much about we love each other, we're together, this and that. It frustrated me from both perspectives. It just felt very contrived and manufactured, where it's like, from Lois's perspective, if the person you love day after day is like, I got to talk to you about something, do you think at some point you might be like, okay, like, what is it? And from Clark's point of view, you also got to stand up for yourself and assert yourself. If day after day, this thing that's weighing on you is going unspoken about, like at a certain point, you got to be like, when she's like, oh, I'm busy, you got to say, no, like we really need to talk about this. And maybe the counter argument is, look, they're young. It's a new relationship. I get that. But still, it just really annoyed me.
It seemed like a lot of time was passing. If you told me, oh, they had a really busy 2 days, they really couldn't connect, I got the impression it was more than 2 days. I got the impression it was more than 3 days, but maybe I'm reading it wrong. It did seem like a lot of time was going on in the suggested cuts between the scenes. Really, they should have been able to get together and have a 5-minute conversation. And to your point, Clark really should have said, no, we really have to talk about this. But maybe he's too polite.
I guess.
If that were the reason that he's too polite to sit her down and really tell her what he needs to tell her, I'd buy that. I would love that explanation. That would be an explanation, first of all, of why he didn't feel he could share that news with her or talk out that issue with her.
Yeah. So that really bothered me. And then there's the episode where Shades of Superman returns. He eavesdrops on her and Sam in the apartment. Sam's complaining about Clark, and Lois is like, yeah, he is different. And as soon as Clark hears that, he flies off. But then, of course, Lois continues to say, like, oh, but that's what I love about him, or like something like that.
Right.
But then, of course, that's one of the other moments that Brainiac later exploits. But it's like, dude, you are different. I mean, I know.
Right.
He doesn't want to be seen in that way, but I don't know. It's kind of a fundamental reality of who you are. So I don't know that maybe I'm being overly critical. And then the Jimmy piece of it, though, again, this was secondary, but it was there too. And there's an episode where Jimmy is asked to speak at this Star Labs symposium, and it ends up being the subject of it is the problem with Superman. And you have Lex leading the charge, talking about Superman's role in the world and why we can't entrust him with this power, things we've heard before. We got to talk more about Lex. That was another complaint I had about this season. So I'm so sorry. but
Lex is the worst part of the season, I think.
We'll circle right back to that because I want to get your take on this. But during this symposium, Lex is going on and on about this, but at a certain point he turns to Jimmy and he's like, thanks, like I couldn't do this without you. Because they had this moment early in the season where Lex is trying to get a job at Star Labs and he's kind of dejected, and Jimmy encounters him and they have this chat. And Jimmy gives him a pep talk, right? And it ends up serving Lex very well where he ends up. But so there's this moment where Lex, after just dressing down Superman and the idea of Superman, turns and thanks Jimmy. And that seems to create some sort of vibe or moment between Clark and Jimmy. So much so that then you have the next episode where they're trying to connect and Jimmy's like so embarrassed. He won't even talk to him and he's dodging his calls and literally running away when he sees Clark in the street. And that's another instance where I just feel like some very basic, very simple communication would have solved this. If he's like, clearly both of them know it was a surprise what the topic of the symposium was, number one.
Right.
And with Lex, if he's like, yo, dude, like I talked to this guy for 10 seconds. I had no idea what his deal was. Like clearly I didn't know.
That's all it would have taken.
That's all it would have taken. And that's what bothered me about this.
Yeah, I have a lot more problems with Lois and Clark's communication problems than Jimmy and Clark's. At the same time, it feels like Jimmy and Clark's miscommunication would have been more easily solved. Jimmy was running away. It's not that he didn't have time. He was really trying to avoid it. Considering how close they were, what good friends they were. Now, was that the episode where Clark was telling him, like, you're the first person to ever make me feel normal. Okay, you don't have time to hear Jimmy out. And Jimmy, you don't have the confidence to tell him exactly what happened. You're innocent in this. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Exactly. This is just a weird misfortune that you pep talked this guy who's now leading this charge.
I agree. Now, positives. That scene between Clark and Jimmy before the symposium where they're talking about, because Jimmy has this line about, I've saved Superman 12 times. And then when it's just Clark and Jimmy, he's like, you saved me 13 times. The first time. I will say there was homoerotic vibe to that scene when they're in that like bubble and they're floating and Jimmy starts tearing up as they have this. I mean, it's lovely. You know, I'm all for the bromance and whatnot, but the vibe of it, I was like, where are we going with this?
Yes. I really don't like calling any kind of display between two men that's tender and vulnerable, and they really love each other. And that's clear even in this not as good season as season one. They really love each other. And I love that. First, I love that the show treats Jimmy with the respect to the character, that he is important enough that he's not only in every episode, he is in an episode that Clark's not in. And that thrilled me to death when I realized, oh, we're really not getting Clark here. Jimmy and Lois are good enough on their own. I feel like in the New 52, weren't we told that Jimmy was going to be a great character and Clark and Jimmy were going to have this great bromance, and Clark actually was going to call him Jim because he respected Jim more than everybody else. And then like whatever came of that, what has been going on with Jimmy since the 1960s? Almost nothing. Is he a man? Is he a child? He's a man in the 90s and he's a child in the 2000s or 2010s. Like he's all over the place. This show knows what Jimmy can do. And this show does it with Jimmy. But as much as I dislike the charges of homoeroticism, anytime two men who love each other show that they love each other, this scene felt very homoerotic. I think you're exactly right.
No, that's the thing. Like, I don't throw that word around either. And I'm right. All for, I mean, look, one of my all-time favorite shows is Scrubs, Turk and JD, Guy Love. Like, no, I'm there for that. But again, just the music, just the setting, the
music, the change in Clark's voice. I was like, no, 13. It was something.
Yeah, but right on for really leaning in. I mean, I do very much like this take on Jimmy. And another thing I love throughout this, at the end of the first season, we had this business about the Daily Planet buying his Flamebird channel and making him head of the video division or whatnot. And so he earns $6 million at the end of the season?
Something like that.
And there's this
several million, whatever it was.
Running bit all season of every time he spends money, you see the balance decrease. And I thought that was great. And so in the first episode, it's Valentine's Day and he splurged on these really extravagant cards for everybody. And you see the money go down. And then he charters a plane for them to take to the Arctic because Clark's ship is there, and really goes down. And it continues to dwindle throughout the season. And then he ultimately spends the last of it hiring Leslie Willis Livewire to help Jimmy and Lois steal this spaceship from Star Labs to go rescue Superman. So I just thought that was such a great bit. Like the Jimmy of it all was fantastic, I thought. Except for that tension that I was talking about.
Right. They do a lot of great visual gags that I've not seen on any other superhero show. And I don't know if it's the anime influence, if that gives them... I know virtually nothing about anime. So maybe this is just like one of the conventions of that art. But boy, that gag, a lot of the cutscene flashback type things where like they're trying to explain what the plan will be. They do a lot of like really good humor for a superhero show. And I love comedians. I love stand-up comedy. Every time I've seen comedy attempted in superhero stuff, I think, I'd rather just not this be here. Don't do it if you can't do it well. I think they do it very well.
And I think they walk the line very well, where I'll go back to the first episode of the season where Clark's ship, right? And it's so funny. It's been almost a year, right, since the first season. And so I'm watching the season 2 premiere and all this business. They're at Star Labs interviewing Hank Henshaw. Talk about these characters who were peppered in, and he has more to do later in the season, but he works at Star Labs. He's an old college friend of Lois's. I'm like, yes, this is great. Like, sky's the limit here with all these characters they're peppering in. But this business about Clark's ship being in orbit and then disappearing, I was like, wait, what was the deal with all this? I went back and I rewatched the end of season 1 just to kind of refresh my memory. This idea that when Clark was exposed to kryptonite at the end of the first season, that it activated the ship, and the ship then started signaling this larger vessel. That finale of season 1, right, was about Clark using the kryptonite on his ship to shut everything down and stop the arrival through that gateway of the larger vessel. Anyway, as I was watching this, like, what was all that about? So I refreshed my memory on it. But in that season premiere, when Clark is on the ship and he encounters AI Jor-El, and Jor-El has this bit about they realize that Lois and Jimmy are there too. He's like, "You brought your mate here, your fragile human mate." He's like, "I don't know what it's like on Earth, but if I had done that with your mother, I'd owe her a grand romantic gesture." And a big part of that
exactly right.
Valentine's Day episode was Clark wanting to do something really just like simple and intimate and personal with Lois, having soup on the roof of the Daily Planet. Everyone's like, "No, you got to go big." So it tied in with the problem he was having in the rest of the episode. And coming from Jor-El, it was particularly humorous. And then you get to one of the moments that like really got me as a dad, and I'm sure you had a similar reaction, but when AI Jor-El, who is fading away because he used his remaining energies to purge the ship of the kryptonite and turn it into this fortress that we never see again. But he has this farewell with his son, and he keeps calling him Philo. So I started calling my son that. He doesn't like it, but Philo. But he has this great moment where he's like, "You took your power and you turned it into a shield for the helpless. I'm so proud of you." Like, oh man, it got me. And so in that one episode, right, we've got the humor and then you got the heart. I loved it. We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw Yeah. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Now, I know I just sang the praises of that premiere. This was another thing though. I think the communication issues are my biggest problem with the show. So in that season 2 premiere, when Clark encounters AI Jor-El, all of a sudden, Jor-El speaks English. And they talk about this. The translation program needed time to catch up or update or whatever. And I guess it made me think back to season 1, right? Because all throughout season 1, anytime Clark encounters AI Jor-El, they're literally speaking different languages. They don't understand each other. And Clark's takeaway, our takeaway, is just that Kryptonians are these conquerors, and for all we know, they're coming back to conquer. They had this 0-day event where they had tried decades earlier, and now they're coming back. And that's the threat. And that's why when Clark's ship activates at the end of season 1, he almost kills himself to destroy the ship because he thinks this whole invasion is coming. Of course, here, Jor-El quickly explains, no, that larger ship that was coming through, that was a ghost vessel. Like there was no one on there, something like that. But then it kind of annoyed me because I'm like, so all that confusion in that first season, just because they were speaking different languages, and then there's nothing, it's not like, oh, Clark did something that then enabled him and Jor-El to understand each other. It just happened. That kind of annoyed me.
I also think we lose something interesting about that interpretation of the relationship between Clark and all of his Kryptonian heritage. I don't particularly like any kind of AI Jor-El. I don't like it in the Christopher Reeve movie. I don't like it now that Christopher Reeve movie has become like the default in the comics, and like as far back as the Jeff Johns, Richard Donner run. So, okay, Richard Donner, that made sense. Like AI Jor-El has been there a lot. And I loved that, okay, we're getting AI Jor-El, but he still doesn't really know anything. Like he sees this vision. So now it's even more confusing that he's so close to having information about his past, about Krypton, and he still can't really have it. He has to do all this guesswork and make these kinds of assumptions. Actually, one of the touching moments of the season was later when Brainiac said Lara, and he's like, my mother, her name was Lara. That is it. I don't know. I don't know if it touches everyone the same way it touches a parent to think of like your kid not knowing you and you as a kid not knowing your mother. That's heartbreaking. And I think there would be a lot more to be mined from Clark having no idea what Krypton was or what it was really about or who these people were or why they sent him away, to never know. And they ruin that with, the translator is working now. Well, how long did that translator take to boot up? Was that like a 20-year translator boot up time? I don't
know. No, because to your point, like that was an aspect of their take on Krypton and Jor-El in the first season that I thought was different and intriguing.
Right.
And the fact that, yes, even though you're seeing Jor-El, like there's still this huge barrier there and it's a different dynamic. And
right.
If we're going to move away from that, I'm okay with it, but it's like we need to account for it in a better way as opposed to like,
something
it
needs
just
to have happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And in that episode, not that we'll go episode by episode, but in that episode, Amanda Waller also gets a hold of a piece of kryptonite, which then plays into the rest of the season. That's what they use to power the army of Metallos that Lex engineers when he takes over Amertech. An episode that also introduces John Henry Irons, which of course I was delighted about that. Yeah. One other super funny thing in that premiere when Clark is talking to the folks at the Daily Planet about what he has planned for Lois. And he's like, and I wrote her a poem. Let me read it. Can you read my mind? And like they all stop. A great callback to Superman, the movie. That was fantastic.
I love that too. I love that he's thinking about buying the ramen and he goes, mild for me and extra spicy for Lois. It's so perfect for them. That's exactly what they would be eating.
I know. Yeah, there were so many nice touches. So I'm glad we're talking about this and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot that I like. I felt like the Daily Planet crew didn't get as much play as I would have liked or as they did in the first season, especially like Steve Lombard has a key moment towards the climax of the season, which I really liked when he helps out after they've been taken by the government led by Waller. But that whole trio of like Steve Lombard and Ronnie Troop and Cat Grant, like I felt like that was kind of fell by the wayside. You got a little bit of Cat, especially in that Bachelor contest episode. But I did like this whole thing with Perry White and his competition with Vicky Vale. I just kind of, and even that only kind of went so far, but it was just like another thing for Perry that you don't always see. But because I feel like normally, yes, even if he talks about other papers, but this was personal. Like there's this personal competition with Vicky Vale, who goes on to offer Lois a job at the Gotham Gazette. So I like that little bit of business. I thought that was funny.
That's a great bit of business. I like giving Perry anything to do.
Anything. We'll take anything.
Never right. In Superman animated series, which I love dearly, like he basically disappeared. There was no sense of him after that first season. Like he appeared at a door once. He was turned into a walrus by Mitzi Spitalik. Like that's really all he had to do is be a walrus for that episode. So I think this is a great take on Perry. He's gruff, but he's not a jerk. I think I get the sense that he's competent at his job, whereas like and I hate to bring up Man of Steel with you or the Snyder movies, but I mean, here's this guy like telling Lois, don't report the news. No one will believe the news. Like, okay, Perry, that's a hot take from a newspaper editor who's been at it for as long as you have. But okay, different take. This Perry, I think, hits a very nice balance between like knowing what he's doing, but not being everybody's favorite uncle like Lane Smith and Lois and Clark. I really like how they're doing it. And giving him anything to do is just helping make the case for why he's an essential character to the Superman lore. But when you only have 10 episodes and you spend 5 of them on Brainiac's ship with possessed or brainwashed Kara and possessed Clark, you don't have time for the great little bits of the Daily Planet staff. And that's what this season really sacrificed. That the first season didn't have to sacrifice. We had it for 10 great episodes.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point. Now, fans of this take on Perry, on the other hand, Lex. Now, in the first season, we had this young man working for Ivo, and I and others speculated, it's probably going to be Lex. And knowing the show, right? Like, there's no wasted character. I'm like, that's going to be him. And sure enough, they pay that off early in the season. They tease us a little bit longer when, a couple of times where he's going to say his name and he gets cut off, but eventually, right? And this is when he decides he's not just going to be Alexander, he's going to be Lex Luthor. Let me toss this to you. Your take, because I know you a few minutes ago you said this was your biggest problem with the season. What's your assessment of this incarnation of Lex?
I just don't get it. Am I supposed to be afraid of this guy? I mean, this guy was Ivo's lackey. He was his assistant or his henchman, whatever word you want to use. This guy was not in charge. A Lex Luthor that I respect is in charge from the moment you see him. He's doing evil stuff, but like he's in charge of that evil stuff. This is a kid. Like this kid, and maybe it's the costume, and maybe it's his voice. His voice and a lot of others on the series. I mean, one of my criticisms of the series, as much as I love the series, their voices very rarely have a distinguishable character. I think Clark sounds like Clark, Lois sounds like Lois, but Lex kind of sounds like Clark. I couldn't really hear the difference like I can with Tim Daly and Clancy Brown. Like those are different people. Lex is not a different person from anyone. And what is his goal? Is his goal money? Is his goal hating Superman? Why does he hate Superman in this version? Is he angry that Superman like put Ivo on ice, or like what? Why is he so angry about Superman? Is it a totally cynical ploy to ingratiate himself and get some kind of big government contract with Waller? I need something for what this kid is doing to make me even care that a Lex Luthor is there. I have another problem with Lex that I have with a lot of the characters on the show. And you said earlier that you like how characters are peppered in. I think sometimes that peppering in loses them. Like, okay, so here's Lex. He's peppered in the first season as Ivo's assistant. And now who is he? Well, he's working for Waller. Waller's the bad guy, and he's like one of these agents working with her. And then like we see Toy Man in another moment in episode 3 or 4, like he's peppered in. Like, okay, well, yeah, he's peppered in. Is he going to come back? Are we now cheated of an actual arc for him? Are we ever going to see like Toy bad guy fun stuff like the big yellow duck in Superman animated series? Deathstroke is peppered in. He's just like the silent, well, pretty silent Waller lackey. And I don't like the character of Deathstroke, but I know a lot of people do. And if I were a fan of him, I'd be real disappointed to see, oh, he's just working for someone. He's not doing his own thing with his own agenda. And do you know, by the way, Chris Parnell does his voice.
Yeah.
It's Dr. Leo Spaceman from 30 Rock. I'm glad Chris Parnell's getting a paycheck. I want him to get all the work he can get. I love that guy. What is he doing in this role? Why did anybody need him for this? It doesn't seem to play to his strengths.
Yeah, I haven't thought about 30 Rock in a while, but yeah, he was such a standout recurring character on that. Your point is well taken about how that kind of backfire. I mean, I guess if characters are peppered in and it's that or nothing, or it's that and then they level up and then they kind of rise to what we would want to see, then I think it's worth it. If not, though, then yeah, that can become more of a detriment than a benefit. I do get what you're saying. I think but the thing with Lex is that I agree with you that I don't really know what his true motivation is. And that's a problem, right? Like, I mean, what we get, especially in that symposium scene where he's talking about Superman, because Jimmy's defending Superman, and Lex essentially brings up the point of like, well, what if he chooses not to use his powers like this? And again, it's this idea that we've seen discussed. And I think when we look at kind of Lex, the ideologue, like that version of the character, that no one person should be entrusted with that level of power. The idea that people won't strive for advancement because they have this God doing everything for them. If that's really what this guy is about, okay. But like you said, I don't think we get enough to really know if it's genuine or not. And if it is not genuine, but he's just using this because he sees this as his way to get what he wants, that's actually pretty interesting.
Yes, it is.
But again, we don't get that.
We don't know.
And I don't want to be a broken record with this, but if you're going to do a young Lex, why not have, even if it's not a past with Clark in Smallville, why not have some sort of friendship or attempted friendship, because then you can create a great contrast between, you can juxtapose Lex and Jimmy and the friendship with Clark and what that looks like in both cases. It just feels like such a missed opportunity to like throw in a young Lex who, like you said, just goes from being Ivo's lackey to Waller's lackey. I mean, by the end, he set up his company and you see the letters on the building and he's got Slade working for him now. So, you know, he advances, I guess, over the course of the season, but it's not developed.
Even then I wonder, well, how did you advance from where you were to where you are now? Okay, now you're setting up your company. Where did you get that money? Were you rich the whole time and you just didn't mention it? Is that how you got your job as Ivo's lackey? Like you were the rich kid who got the cool internship, or like what was your path? What is your motivation? We know nothing about this guy, but I feel like we're supposed to be excited to be getting Lex now. I'm not excited. I'm actually kind of angry. I was fine without Lex. The first season was so good.
Yeah, and talking about vocal performance, it's like there's in terms of the visuals, in terms of the character design and the vocal performance and just the characterization we get, there's nothing that feels distinct about this Lex that really pops. And Lex should, like, if you're going to use Lex, like, and again, I know it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, and I also know I'm on my whole Superboy kick, so I got this on the brain, but still, if he had done something where Lex was this childhood friend of Clark's, and either he found out that Clark was different, or almost did, and had a bad reaction, well, then that helps account for why Clark keeps Jimmy in the dark for all those years that they're living together, right? Until we got that revelation in season 1 where Jimmy's like, yeah, no, I knew you had powers from our first day. But it's like, oh, but then it helps account for like this one friendship that went in a different direction, but how Jimmy's then not that guy. It's different, and it could be a different type of dynamic. So I feel like they left a lot on the table with this.
I mean, even just to make the kid bald. And you know what? Don't even tell me why he's bald. That's the one area I would be happy to not know. Because then I'd be thinking, well, why is he bald? And at least then he's got some kind of distinct look. Because now he's got shaggy hair the same as every other kid that I taught in my 16 years teaching. Okay, yeah, that's what kids look like now. And he looks like, what's his face on Superman and Lois with the shaggy hair. Give me something different. And put him in a suit. Give me, I don't know. I just hate this interpretation of Lex, and I don't normally hate an interpretation of Lex. Like Lex is one of the few areas in Superman where like every time it is different, I think, well, that's actually kind of interesting.
Lex, and we've talked about this a lot, there are a lot of different ways you can spin Lex, and they all have their value, you know, and it can take a number of different tracks, but this, I don't know, is really any one thing or the other enough. So I'll say this, if we're talking season 3 hopes, I really hope they can nail down Lex, you know, show us his backstory, like give us more with him. And maybe that's the direction they're heading. And I'll be happy to do this episode next year and be like, oh, this is great. Like now they really stuck the landing and I'm glad with it. But yeah, this was, I don't know. It was tough. A few other kind of major beats here where we do get this introduction of John Henry Irons, who's this weapon engineer working for Amertech. And he's developed this line of metallo armored, not even armored soldiers, but they're robots, right? And the head of the company is moving forward with this unstable power source that is potentially very destructive over the protestations of John Henry Irons. And eventually, of course, he dons the original suit that he had developed and he helps in that episode. And then, of course, as we get to the climax of the season and Brainiac's invasion. And actually, at the end of that Amertech episode, you do have Lex with his newly formed company taking over Amertech, and I guess that, you know, feeds into this partnership that he's engaged in with Waller. But again, even that's just kind of like, it just kind of pops up. But John Henry Irons, man, I love this character. I was happy to see him here. There's also a really nice bit of connective tissue where one of the members of the Newsboy Legion, Flip, is that her name? Is actually Flip, is actually Natasha, his niece. So I really liked that. It was visually interesting. If, you know, normally when John Henry Irons is depicted, he's pretty fit, like and physically capable. This was a much like, I won't say schlubby, but like a much like stockier version of the character. But I was happy to see him. What was your take on it?
It was a great design because it's not a design we've seen before. I was excited to see something new, something that didn't have magic metal that could make his mouth move. That's always bothered me about the steel design. Like, okay, well, how is your mouth moving? I don't know why I can't get past that. When I get past how's your magic ring working in Green Lantern? I worry about the mouth and not the magic ring. So this design really did well. This is one of their better designs in the season.
Yeah, it was cool. I wanted more. When he showed up, I was like, oh, great, he'll be here. And I only get, But again, like we're saying, you only get 10 episodes, and a good chunk of them are off-world. So you don't have as many opportunities for that. So that's obviously another character I would like to see more time with next season. While Lois annoyed me a good bit, she has the standout scene towards the end of the season when she helps Clark break free of this virtual reality he's been placed, and I enjoyed that. And earlier on, there's that episode where we get the flashbacks with her and Sam as she was growing up, and we kind of see this scene play out through the years of Sam and her in the woods, and him trying to teach her how to find her way home with the North Star. And you see, and this is juxtaposed with them in the present, where Sam is, he had been hiding out at Clark and Jimmy's apartment, but he knew Waller was after him. A number of reasons, including the fact that he has these stockpiles of Kryptonian tech that he's hidden that she wants to get a hold of. And so Sam, is trying to essentially get away and go into hiding. And Lois is trying to stop him and get him to stay and work together. And, eventually he does give her the slip and he disappears until his reappearance at the end of the season. But it was great because in the flashbacks and the present, you see it's like, he does love, he does care. This is the way he shows it and the way that he's equipped to show it. It's like he's hard on her, but it's to prepare her to take care of herself. Cause that's the way he knows how to show the love.
Right. And he even says, in hindsight, there are things I'd do differently if I could.
Yeah.
So that shows a lot more maturity to this character than it seemed like we were getting in that first season, when I thought he was kind of more two-dimensional than he turned out to be. That it was a very touching episode. I really liked that one.
Yeah, Sam, we talk about Perry, right? There's always a lot of untapped potential. Sam Lane's another character where I feel like it's easy to play him as just a villain, and there are more shit. So that's why what we've seen on Superman and Lois, like what we see here, I'm a big fan of. Late last year we looked at that New Krypton saga from the comics, which I liked overall, but the Sam Lane there was just like full on villain, and it just felt too one note. It's like he doesn't feel like a person anymore in something like that.
It's not only too one note, but it's a problem I have with a lot of comics. The world feels so small when one of the chief villains in the universe happens to be one of the protagonist's fathers. And the trend in superhero comics that I guess is one of the big problems that I had with the CW shows, were like, okay, all of your friends are now the superheroes. Yep. You have no civilian friends. When I started reading comics, Tim Drake was Robin. And now who's Robin? Oh, Batman's son. Who's Superboy now? Oh, Superman's son. You have to be related to these people to like count in the universe.
But yeah, no, I hear you. Now, so that was something with Lois that I really did enjoy. We get to that bachelor, most eligible bachelor, contest episode that Superman is participating in for charity. And that ultimately culminates in Lois breaking up with Clark. I think their communication issues have festered. There's also clearly jealousy as she sees him up on stage and kind of flirting with Silver St. Cloud, I guess, who's one of the other participants in this charity event.
Kat was pushing Lois's buttons. And one of the things I actually really did like in that episode leading up to the breakup is, Lois's jealousy. It tracks to me that Lois, being as, I don't know, whatever word you want to call Lois, self-assured, self-confident, maybe if you want to spin that with a negative twist, egotistical, it tracks that she would hear Kat saying like, oh, Superman must like this other lady, or, oh, it can't possibly be you. And that's the thing that fires her up. Well, why can't it be me? I'm the one who broke the story about him. It makes sense it would be me. That's so much more interesting a personality flaw in Lois than all the other interpretations are like, oh, she can't spell.
Yeah.
One of the greatest journalists in the whole world doesn't know how to spell basic words. Like this is an actual personality flaw that feels so true to who we all know Lois is. So I liked that part of it.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point about the spelling, especially in this day and age with beyond even spell check, autocomplete. I mean, at this point, how often do you need to be like, how do you spell this? It's like, it spells it for you. So, yeah, no, Kat's role in that, you're right, was really critical. And like, in fairness, again, I get what the season is trying to do. I mean, you have them, not connecting in certain ways. And then again, there's just a sense of how different they are. Like, you see it manifesting, and then Kat is really amplifying that. So, it does culminate in her breaking up with him right as we intersect with the Kara storyline, where Clark had sent off that beacon after he overheard Lois saying he's different, right? And so he sends off that beacon. And before I get to Kara, two other things. I didn't think I had as many complaints, but as we talk about them, more of them are coming up.
We still love the show, though. Right?
I love the show. I really do love the show. But it drove me nuts how many times Lois called Superman Clark when they were out in the field and he was in costume. Like, especially when they were breaking Sam out of the Task Force X. That whole thing. Like, there were multiple instances when she called him Clark. I'm like, what are you doing?
I didn't even think of that.
Fair enough.
He's so Clark in my head. Like, yeah, I guess she would call him Clark.
Yeah. No, but just in terms of preserving the secret, I feel like we need a little bit more discretion. But no, here's the bigger thing that I had. I get that they're showing he wants this connection with his homeworld. Totally fine. I get that. But in calling our attention to this tension with Lois and then the breakup and then this little tiff with Jimmy, what about Ma and Pa in all of this? Like, all this talk about I'm alone. It's like, your parents are right there, and they were really MIA for this season for the most part, except for, a couple little bits and at the end. It really bothered me. It's like, I would have appreciated some acknowledgement of them because they're like a key piece of this puzzle that went really ignored in the furtherance of, oh, he's so alone.
I don't know why he didn't fly home for a slice of pie and parent advice. It seemed like if they're going to appear, like, that's why they should appear, to talk to him about that decision. Yeah. And as frustrating as it was that his girlfriend couldn't talk to him about that, like, yeah. And, I didn't even think of that until you said it. Now I'm when I was last here, I got so angry at how I found all these flaws in a book that I love. A book I still love, even after I spoke for an hour and a half about how much I didn't like it and how the voice of the character was not written correctly and all that. I really wanted to come on here and sing something's praises. And here I am falling into the same trap. And you're giving me even more fuel. I didn't even think at how wasted his parents were in this whole arc, that they would have been the only logical choice for him to even discuss it with.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to that scene from Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, that Tempest episode in season 2, when Lois learns the secret, right? And they're in the car together, and she's been mad, but now she's come around, and she says to him, she's like, it must have been so hard. Like, you've been alone. And it's probably one of my favorite moments from the series, and certainly from that episode, when he's like, well, I wasn't alone. He's like, oh, I had my parents. And like, to your point, if you're going to have the Kents there, and as we've talked about, you don't always have to. There are different ways to spin this, but if you're going to have them there, have them there. So I don't know. Now I'm kind of going back on what I was saying too about, like, oh, it's great. They have all these characters here, but I don't know if you're not using them to the degree you can. And like I said, it just felt manufactured. Like, you wanted Clark to be at a point of despair where he presses that beacon. He's like, whatever's out there. Like, but it's like, okay, but again, a lot of the tension felt forced, and we're ignoring the Kents. So that was kind of the other big thing. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of 2 of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Creator and podcaster Perry Constantine, host of Superhero Cinephiles, has a special offer for listeners of this podcast. Visit percivalconstantine.com/DFK or click the link in the show notes. Fill out the form and then get 2 free novels and 1 free superhero short story. The novels are Vanguard, Heroes Forged, an Avengers-inspired team of superheroes, and Ronin Born, a cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic, fascist Japan. The short story is Omega Knights, Fire and Lightning, a Power Rangers-inspired prequel to an upcoming serial. Take advantage of this offer today, and be sure to catch Superhero Cinephiles on all major podcast platforms. Again, this is the point in the season where we intersect with Kara Zor-El. So, like, the show gives us a version of Supergirl. She shows up and initially interacts with Jimmy, and they have this whole day together. And this kicks off really the final act of the season, where they battle, and she brings him to Brainiac, and there's all the brainwashing, all that, which we'll talk about. But I mean, just generally speaking, this interpretation of the Supergirl character, I'm just curious how you felt about it.
Well, I liked that she was wearing more clothes at her age than Michael Turner drew her when she first got to Earth in that Superman Batman series. Like, I thought, okay, she's got a sensible vest. She's got like pants and you can't see her underwear. We're already off to a better start for this Kara Zor-El's debut. I liked her doe-eyed love of Earth things. What is a hot dog? That was nice. It's been done before, but it's always nice when it's done. I don't know that I love that she's responsible now for what she's responsible for, even brainwashed, even controlled by Brainiac. Like, she's really done a lot of horrible things in the universe. I have trouble with characters like that who are brainwashed or controlled, like, ever really giving them a full pass that maybe they're entitled to. Like, Hal Jordan, in my mind, was Parallax and did kill the people he killed, and even though he was controlled, like, it was still his body doing it. It's not my favorite take on Supergirl. I liked it. It was a take, and I don't think that take has been done with Supergirl, and that's one of the strengths I think I talked about at the beginning of this this complaint marathon. I even when I don't agree with the choices, I like that there are choices.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to skip ahead to something you know and the audience knows I absolutely loved. The battle culminates with Clark and Kara in the sun.
Yeah.
Which folks know is one of my favorite things to see. Whenever you're in doubt, whenever there's a problem, powers are gone, powers are out of whack, you're dead, whatever, you throw Superman or Supergirl in the sun and you are good to go. So I love that. That was great. I was very happy with that. Yeah, this version of Supergirl. So again, they battle. She takes him to Brainiac's ship, and then we get kind of like the history lesson, right? And they use, I guess that is the Black Mercy itself as well. That's the thought projector. So. Yeah, interesting that they went with the Black Mercy as a device as opposed to an organic being, but that's okay.
Now, there's another thing I thought peppered in. Now it's wasted. Like, now what does Mongol do? Like, that's Mongol's whole thing. Every time Mongol shows up, you want to see him do the Black Mercy. And now it's here, just thrown away as a device.
It is, but they use that to show each other, Clark's memories of growing up and learning how to play catch with Jonathan and not throw the ball too hard. And it's this, very, charming childhood moment. But of course, Kara has a different take on it. Of like they made you hide who you are and hold back. We get a nice payoff to that at the end of the season when Clark and Kara are playing catch. And then you see, we kind of get more visions of Krypton, and we had gotten some of that in the premiere as well from Jor-El. And through all of this, I'm kind of conflating some of these flashbacks and exposition dumps, but essentially, like, Kryptonians were these warmongering conquerors, and the Brainiac AI was their strategist, right, who made up all their battle plans. But then it came to the point where I guess Krypton decided on a new path and they were entering peace talks. And that's when Brainiac went rogue and destroyed the planet, which brings up a whole other thing about, whether the planet's destruction should be due to, natural causes or...
I thought about Rogol Zar. Yeah.
Rogol Zar, shades of Rogol Zar with this. I mean, for me, this is too far. Did he say... Because I think when he's invading Earth, he mentions the Black Zero Protocol. Did they mention that when we got the flashback of him destroying Krypton too? Was that what he said or no?
I don't remember.
In any event, we don't know. I guess we don't know exactly what he does, but like he brings about the destruction of Krypton, which to me, and again, this is just a personal thing. Like that's a bridge too far.
Yep, me too.
What the animated series did was fine. Like he knew about it and he didn't say it and he hid it, right? And he tried to discredit Jor-El. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Like you're purposely trying to keep this from being acted upon. So you have a role, but like you didn't destroy the planet. So this, I didn't really care for that.
I liked Brainiac a lot less than I liked their take on Supergirl, because in the animated series, I think, okay, I can see that this is a computer program. He goes to its extreme logical end of preserving the knowledge, and he can't preserve the knowledge until the world is gone. So he has to destroy the world to preserve the knowledge. Okay, I can see the logic there. And then it's not really that he is a villain exactly. What he is doing is horrible. And yeah, he's a villain, has to be stopped, but he doesn't see himself as a villain the same way that, I mean, I guess this guy doesn't see himself as a villain either, but an AI designed for war is a lot less nuanced to take than an AI designed for knowledge preservation. Like one knowledge preservation is a good thing. He just goes about it an extremely bad way, and war is not really a good thing. So there's a lot is lost in Brainiac for me in this take. And the fact that he's wearing that cloak too, if we're talking about Brainiac, he just looked like a blob the whole time. I almost rather the overdone computer-generated geometric robot shapes going. Like, at least that's interesting to look at. There's nothing to look at. I kept waiting for this Brainiac to like rip open his cloak and like there's like something, I don't know, interesting at all, some kind of difference, something to say like, okay, this is what I've been hiding under this cloak, and he never does. Or did I miss it? Did I turn away?
No, I mean, that's really it. And it's like he wants out of that body, right? That he ultimately wants to possess and does possess Clark for a time. So no, I mean, yeah, I think that was kind of it. Yeah, I mean, you really said it perfectly. I agree with all of that. Like I said, it's obviously it is Brainiac, but it's not the motivation we typically see from the character. There are shades of Zod, and he makes people kneel when he, kind of enacts his mind control or whatnot. But even Zod, and just kind of the idea of conquering, I think brings us more into the realm of Zod. But even Zod, it's like, it's not just about conquest and destruction, right? It's about the preservation of the Kryptonian race and bringing back Krypton. So right. I don't know what this is. And then there's this whole other angle where before we see Brainiac or know that it is Brainiac for sure, Kara keeps talking about her father. And we knew from Jor-El, I mean, we know from Superman lore, but our characters know from that first episode of the season from AI Jor-El that Kara's father is his brother Zor-El, right? And so you're not quite sure, like, are we dealing in Zor-El territory? Funny enough, though, the idea of Brainiac raising Supergirl, I believe, was one of the ideas for Superman 3 back in the day that they obviously didn't pursue. And it's so funny. We talked about this when we covered Superman 3 and 4, when we looked at that Superman Redeemed fan cut, and it's been so long at this point, I don't remember all the particulars, but I think that was kind of an idea. So it was just kind of funny that we kind of got there in this way. But so, like, shades of Zor-El, that it's this father figure, and it's also Brainiac, but kind of elements of Zod all swirled together. But I don't think that blend really served them well for me. And I know, I guess we differ on this, but it's like, I wouldn't have minded if they just did Zor-El. I feel like that gives you a blank canvas that you can do more of what you want, because that's the character's, been used, but, not to the extent of Zod or of Brainiac. So it's like you could do something else. And then hand in hand with that, did I not like the brainwashing, right? And you have to make it brainwashing because Brainiac has Kara committing genocide. I mean, like, you know, when she and Clark are talking about everything and how essentially Kara's presentation of this is like they're doing a good thing, right? As they're spreading the Kryptonian way and bringing all of these planets into the Kryptonian empire. And Clark's like, well, let me see one of these planets. And they go to Thanagar and it's devastated. It's a dead planet. And that's when
another peppered in and wasted thing.
Yeah, I guess we're never going to get Hawkman.
No.
Well, we still can, I guess. But, you know, but that starts, like the dominoes kind of start to fall when she sees. But so it's like when we put all these pieces together, I guess for planets that don't submit, I mean, Brainiac has a brainwashed Kara wipe them out. And so to your point, it's like you're putting an awful lot on this character, but you have to, because otherwise there's no redemption. Whereas I feel like if it had been Zor-El or even this Brainiac, but she weren't actually brainwashed, which again, just robs her of any agency. Like she just becomes a puppet of this character.
Right.
But if you make it like she's been raised and indoctrinated and she thinks this is the correct way, and yeah, maybe she's destroying some buildings on these planets and you know, making people sign a loyalty pledge, but she's not like massacring them. She can have a redemption and she can come around. And as opposed to like, oh no, she's brainwashed and now she's not. Like, I really didn't like this, man.
I don't understand on Thanagar when she's like looking real hard at that mural and then I don't know why it like changes and she can see what it is. It's a mural like depicting her destroying the planet. Who made that? At what point was that carved? In the middle of the destruction? It was presenting the destruction. Like, so she was laser beaming the whole world dead, and this guy was like chiseling away with the gold and the hammer. I don't know what that was about. That's the part that really distracted me in this whole episode. Is that one scene. I thought about that the rest of the time. Like, what, did she make it to show her supremacy to whoever might come to this planet later? That made very little sense. And it's so much to put on her and expect us then by the end of the series that she's flying away with Clark when matching uniforms. So strange.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Again, brainwashing just feels... It's like, again, she's brainwashed. She's been brainwashed. And then Clark gets, again, beyond brainwashed. He gets outright controlled by Brainiac, who takes over his body. So it's like, I don't know. I would have preferred a different approach, I suppose, at a minimum. You know, again, eventually she realizes that this is amiss. And I guess it's at this point when Clark is under the control of the Black Mercy, or I guess at this point, Brainiac is, you know, kind of going through his memories, trying to find his weakness. Right. And it seems like Clark has broken free, but in the end, he's actually not. And now he's trapped in this virtual reality created by the Black Mercy. And that's what Brainiac uses to take over his body. But as Supergirl, you know, kind of realizes what's been going on, this is where she encounters Lois and Jimmy, who we get this whole like flashback episode to show how they ended up there, that they took it upon themselves to enlist Livewire and Brain and Mansour Mallah from Cadmus, who we had met last season, to steal the spaceship. Like, that was a fun episode to see the lengths that they would go through for him. And you see Lois gleaning some kind of insight from the relationship between Livewire and her girlfriend Heatwave about love is not for cowards, right? And needing to take these chances and all of that. So yeah, I thought that was cool.
I loved that episode, and I loved Mala and Brain coming back. They were my favorite part of season one. Them and the League of Lois Lanes, my two favorite parts of season one. I had trouble figuring out Livewire and like, how is she different from Heatwave? They're another pair of like, okay, yeah, it's cool that I know these characters from the comics, but do they have personalities here, or am I not picking up on their personalities? Do they not have time to have a personality? Because I just felt nothing for them the way that I hate going back to animated series. Like Livewire was so distinct. She had a story. She had that voice with what's her name? Tank Girl. What is her name?
Lori Petty?
Lori Petty. I could not come up with Lori Petty. I kept thinking of Patty Mayonnaise. I don't know why I thought of Patty Mayonnaise, but there I was. That was in my head, and it would not let out Lori Petty. So anyway, Livewire here just does nothing for me. A lot of the villains from that first season did nothing for me because they didn't feel distinct. They just felt like, okay, here's more peppering in. And, here's now a chance for, as you defended the peppering in earlier, that you might see them again and now they blossom into their own thing. I don't feel like she's blossomed at all. She's still a very flat character. But boy, Mala and Brain have blossomed. They've got so much personality just from go. It's great to see them again.
Yeah, that was cool. I liked seeing how all of that came together as they mount this rescue attempt. And I was getting at this earlier, but when Brainiac is sort of inside Clark's mind, he's showing him his memories, but also fake memories of things that haven't happened, but then is ultimately able to exploit these moments we've been talking about, hearing Lois say that he's different and the breakup and the thing with Jimmy. And it's like, that's, I guess, what gives Brainiac enough to exert this control. And again, it seems like Clark is broken free, but then we get this whole episode where he's under the control of the Black Mercy and he's living this life seemingly on Krypton. And Lois grabs one of those Black Mercy devices and puts it on herself, and she's able to enter this same simulation. I liked aspects of this. When we get to the conclusion, when she's ultimately able to help him break free, the music here was so good, and the two of them were just in lockstep, unified, and they're taking out the enemies in front of them, and literally punching through this ceiling that's the sky above them that's kept them in this prison. So I liked that aspect of it. But I guess as far as this version of Clark's life on Krypton that we see, I don't know, I just was curious how you felt about it. Did you think it was effective? Did they leave anything on the table here? Like, how did this work for you?
It was another that, for me, if we're only going to have 10 episodes, I didn't need a whole episode of this. I'd rather have been back on Earth sooner dealing with whoever those people were that Waller was meeting with. It was very... I took it, and I don't know if it was intentional or I'm giving Lois too much credit, that Lois wills herself to be the glitch. It wasn't just some luck that the thing happened to glitch out and they couldn't delete her. I loved that they couldn't delete her. You can't delete Lois Lane. Right.
Like every time she's found out, like it just restarts. And so, but she's got to go, but now she's got a head start. She knows where to go. And so she slowly chips away. Yeah.
Right. I'd love to know how many times it really took. Is it like a Groundhog Day thing where like he's actually been in there for how many years? Do people theorize that Phil was in the Groundhog Day world? How long did it take her to get him out of that place? I don't know. I'm sure we didn't see all of it. And I really liked that Lois is that undeniable and they are so fated to be together that their love enabled that. That was one of the few times that I was okay with the way that the show talked about love, because a lot of times they talk about love and I was like, oh, that's so corny. Oh, you're better than this show. Why are you? Love isn't for cowards. Oh God, put that on a Hallmark movie or put that on a 13-year-old's MySpace page. But here I really liked the two of them and their relationship and her bursting in. You're Clark. You're my boyfriend. But that's Lois. That's what, boy, even though I didn't like the episode, Lois and Clark were so good in it.
So the whole thing with him in the Black Mercy is, again, I don't mean to keep complaining about this stuff, but like, if you're going to give him this life on Krypton, make it something that's hard to pull him away from.
Right.
If he's lonely in this season, because he's forgotten about the parents who raised him, if he's lonely in this season and he's craving this connection to his homeworld, like make it a homeworld that then is going to be more of a struggle to separate him from. We see him feeding a mini sun to a baby sun eater, which is great. And like right out of All-Star Superman.
I liked that part.
And then he's immediately chastised by his quote unquote mother, Laura, who's like essentially criticizes him for showing this compassion, showing this weakness. So like instantly it's this sense of, oh, this isn't right.
Right.
And whereas I feel like they could have gone the opposite route and it would have been more interesting. Again, this is just another instance. Monday Morning Quarterback, not my show, but right. I just feel like they left something on the table here as far as like what you could have shown of his Kryptonian life.
Well, they they've done that. I mean, they did for the Man Who Has Everything on Justice League.
Yeah.
I would have liked the Black Mercy, even being as cold as it was, if we had any kind of understanding that Clark so intimately understood the world of Krypton from years ago. He's got years to process what Krypton really meant. And then the Black Mercy is not powerful enough to give him a rosier sense of it for him to want to pull himself out of. Even the Black Mercy, whatever it is, organic or non-organic, Brainiac tool or whoever, it can't fool him. He sees through it and he realizes that those people are jerks. But that's not the Clark we have. The Clark we have has like 10 minutes of Kryptonian knowledge. So like that's not enough to make me think he's capable of not letting that thing fool him. So yeah, I don't know in that sense why they didn't make it more challenging for him to want to leave that construction.
Well, at least at a minimum, from Lois's perspective, I think the Lois side of it worked very well. And you get that moment of them united, breaking free. And then we have the climax of the season here where you have Brainiac mounting this invasion of Earth, taking control of the army of Metallos. You have all of these different kind of factions coming together here. I think the aspect of it that I enjoyed the most was Sam Lane's reemergence, the little moment he has with Waller. And then our season 1 villains, essentially, like Silver Banshee and Livewire and Heatwave, actually helping, which I thought was a nice touch. And I can't imagine this was necessarily coordinated, but kind of a nice parallel to what's going on in the current Superman books, where we've had Livewire and Silver Banshee and Parasite, these adversaries, Metallo, undergoing some sort of redemptive arc. So I kind of liked the parallels between all of that. Steve Lombard showing up at a critical moment, along with Perry White and Vicky Vale after Jimmy and Kara and Lois have been taken by Waller. So John Henry Irons getting in on the action. So just everyone coming together to fight off this invasion, I liked a lot. We get to the point where Brainiac initiates the Eradicator override and once again takes over Kara. And through the power of hugging and friendship, they are able to break free. Clark just grabs her and hugs her, and Lois and Jimmy come and join in. How did that play for you?
I mean, that was par for the course at that point. At that point, I kind of knew what we were dealing with. If the rest of this season had been as good, I might have liked that less. But I thought, okay, let's just get through this. Yeah, they hug her and she's free.
Yeah, it's very Goodwill Hunting. Right? It's not your fault. And then we get this final confrontation where Kara jumps in front of this blast, right? And, plummets into the sun and Clark goes after her and they're together. But then there's this fear, I think Clark, who says, we're not gonna be able to escape the gravitational pull. Then all of a sudden you see their battle scars healing and they realize this is the source of their power. And I'm like, yeah, dummies, this is the whole thing. No, but they're early on. They're still learning. I'm not criticizing that, but I loved it. Like, I love that moment.
But I was not sure about that sun thing, because here in whatever info dump we were in, where Kara is showing Clark Krypton, don't we see people flying there?
Oh, I don't remember specifically.
I'm pretty sure we do.
Do we?
I don't know
it's
which
not like
info dump it is
or something.
It's not jetpacks, and I mean, isn't she saying like these were like the most advanced people, and like we were more? Am I making that up?
I don't know. I'll have to take another look.
I'm making that up.
I'll take another look. But also, audience, feel free to reach out. I hope it's not. That'd be another thing for me to complain about. If it's like the race of Supermen, like in the
if
early
it's a race
days
of Supermen,
comics.
right? And if that's what they're going for, great. But then don't tell me that it's the sun doing it, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just looking for something to complain about now. I really have no skin in that game. Whether it's a race of Supermen or it's because of the yellow sun, maybe the yellow sun makes them better. But when Kara's in space in that episode, and like she makes fun of Clark for thinking he needs a space helmet, doesn't she say to him like, "Oh, you dummy! We don't need space helmets. We're Kryptonian."
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like, well, then wait. Why would a Kryptonian not need a space helmet unless they were the race of Supermen? And then how? I don't know. I don't.
Questions abound. And then at the end, right? What is it that they push the ship, Brainiac ship, into the sun? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yet they keep his core. What is this? Because
for what?
So then we have this epilogue. We have this whole montage at the end here that the credits play over. I mean, now I'm really on a roll here. I understand on Adult Swim, you have a very confined period of time. And so you have to be economical and the credits play over that epilogue. I get it. But on Max, could you not have shown us those scenes without text across the whole thing? It really annoyed me. But we have this whole montage at the end and Kara is recuperating at the Kent farm. Finally, Clark remembered he has parents. And the Brainiac core is just like sitting on the nightstand next to her. I mean, and I'm just saying to myself, why?
What is this for?
Why?
This is not a fond memory she has. And it's not like the Brainiac core was Zor-El. It's not like Brainiac had replaced Zor-El and that's how he got a hold of Kara to begin with. So she's not holding on to some kind of memento from her father. Yeah, that was a strange choice to have that sit next to her.
I know we're armed with having experienced decades worth of Brainiac stories where we know, like, you never keep a piece of him. Even when there is no piece, he still survives. But even given their lack of knowledge, look, you guys think this is a good idea? This is going to end well? It won't. But anyway, and then we get this whole wrap up. Lois doesn't take the job with the Gotham Gazette. Lex, of course, now he has his new company and Slade is working with him. Everyone gathers at the Kent farm for a barbecue. Superman and Kara, this happened right when they were in the sun, get these new suits. I mean, the Kara side is one of it, but for Clark, I thought we were really, locked into the costume that we had. And so now we got this updated version with no trunks.
No trunks. I really liked the costume that we had. And I less like this new costume. I like that the suit came from Krypton, right? But then Ma added the trunks.
Yes.
So it was like bridging the two explanations where the costume came from. It was a nice compromise. So I thought, okay, let's just leave it there.
Yeah.
But now the suit comes from, maybe the suit can materialize however he wants it to, or is it that he's reusing like Brainiac nanobot technology to reconstruct the suit? And then like, why that? Are we supposed to take like some kind of symbolism from any choices that's on that suit? Is the slightly more lightning colored yellow of the S supposed to suggest something about the change in powers? I don't know, but without any kind of comment on it, I was just kind of wanting more. Like, why that?
Same. Like I'm all good with the suit being Kryptonian. I actually think people disagree, and I'm not opposed to Martha making the suit. I guess my ideal scenario is Martha making the suit out of Kryptonian material, which I think in the broad scheme of things, like that's probably what we've seen more often than not. Because again, it's that nice blend. So here you kind of got a version of that where he's put in a costume that's Kryptonian, but then she adds the trunk. So you have that combination.
Right. I like that.
But then, you do lose that blend of his Earth and Kryptonian heritage. How does poor Ma gonna feel when she sees this after she's been ignored?
Where did the trunks go?
She's been ignored this whole season, and now the trunks are gone. But we end this final scene of our new quartet. We have Lois and Clark and now Jimmy and Kara, and they all, fly off. Of course, Clark and Kara carrying the others, fly off at the end of this. I mean, had this been the series finale, if we weren't getting a season 3, because initially it was a 2-season order.
Right.
I do think this would have been a satisfying ending to it. I mean, there's still some threads, Lex, being a key one, but it still would have felt, I think, satisfying, right?
Sure. One of my hopes for season 3 then is that they don't keep that quartet. I really, I mean, as many times over the years as a female character in a male superhero story has been reduced to being arm candy or a damsel in distress or whatever, I don't want to see Jimmy turn into Kara's arm candy. I don't want to see anybody turn into arm candy. And adding Kara, if they're going to keep that quartet, I think it really then cheapens Jimmy's contribution to the story and cheapens Jimmy as a character. He's less appealing to me if he's going to be Kara's boyfriend.
I don't disagree. I'm curious. I mean, I think I pretty much laid out what I hope to see in the next season, but I definitely, I feel like where this show is at its best is really the world of Metropolis and the Daily Planet. Like, again, and not to harp on this, but we spent a lot of time off world on this Brainiac ship. I don't think that's where the show is at its best. So utilize these characters now that you've put into place. I definitely want more John Henry Irons. We have Hank Henshaw. I would love to see them, play out that storyline. We know where that certainly could go, even with whatever twist they might put on it. And yeah, with Supergirl, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still an animated series and it's fun, but it's like, I would hope to some extent, to whatever extent they're able to, explore the trauma of her overcoming what she's done. Because again, and like, in case anyone like hasn't watched it, I mean, she's like annihilated planets. It's a lot.
Right. It's not even just, well, I guess we only see the one city that they go back to, but it's implied that that's the whole planet. I mean, that every city they could go to on that planet is going to be like that. So yeah, whole planets, at least 3 that she named, right? Are we to assume that there's more beyond that, or? I
think I would have to imagine there's more. I mean, she's been out there with Brainiac for years, for like 20 years. That's the other thing too. Unlike the other versions of the story where, she's older and then her pod is stuck in suspended animation, but like she was older and she was meant to be Clark's protector. I mean, here we see them both leaving as babies, leaving Krypton. And then, I don't know exactly at what point in her journey, but she's, found and raised by Brainiac. So yeah, I mean, I think there would be a lot for her to work through, and I hope the show affords some space for that. This ended up being more of a gripe session than I intended, but I think
I bring that out in people.
No,
I have that effect.
No, I think we were fair. Again, overall, I enjoy the show. I enjoyed watching, but I really did have some issues with this. But only because, again, I know what the show is capable of. I don't say any of this, like, oh, it's not good or not worth watching. Still a fan, but
definitely worth watching.
Definitely. But is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to?
Well, one more gripe I have is, and this is not a problem with this show. It's actually a problem with a lot of Superman material. They have these Lois and Clark characters here as a reporter or reporters. And then anytime you have like a snippet of what they're writing, and I interpreted that last episode of like writing of whatever that narration was. I thought that was like a newspaper column, right?
Yeah, I think it was that Clark was writing.
Yeah.
Right?
He's going to be a columnist? A columnist and a reporter are doing very different things. And yeah, okay, a columnist uses reporting in the column, but there's no way that this kid who was just an intern yesterday is going to be a columnist at like the most important newspaper in the DC universe. I don't know why they do that as often as they do that, other than maybe the writer just, I don't know, doesn't know what a newspaper is. I can't. And they do it in the comics. They do it on a lot of adaptations throughout media, that they have Lois writing a lot of columns when she should be a reporter.
I don't disagree. I think that's one of those things where writers like that device of getting the character's thoughts. And it's like, you could have just had Clark narrating. You could have just done that, but maybe they didn't feel it like fit the style of the show. And so it's like, well, okay, it could be something that he wrote. Right. But yes, there is a difference between like hard news reporting, which is just the facts, versus a column, an editorial, an opinion piece, which is it's something like this. And in comics too, we see this a lot, where it's like you read what they're writing and it's like, well, this is clearly just your opinion. Like, this is not a hard news article. So I think that's a cheat that they just kind of accept to get that effect that they want. But I agree.
Cheat is the right word, because I think the show would be capable of doing a hard news story and getting the same information across.
I think that's
the same reflection of Clark.
I mean, that's a greater writing challenge. And I think they could do it. And I think that would be cool. I'm with you. Yeah. Well, curious to hear what other people think about this, because I've been, it's funny. I didn't watch this week to week. I just let them pile up and then I binged them. So I saw people like posting about it online, but I didn't look too closely because I wanted to avoid spoilers. But my sense, I think this was a well-received season. So I don't know. People might be listening to this and be like, you guys didn't like it. Again, enjoyed it, but we gotta call them like we see them. But I'm really looking forward to the third season, and I hope that it delivers kind of some of these things that we're talking about.
And even if it doesn't, if it all it delivers is a season 2, it's still a great show.
The other thing too is, and we've been doing this long enough now with the show generally and all of the guests who come on. It's like whenever there's something we don't like, it comes from a place of love and thoughtfulness, right? Like we discuss this thoughtfully. It's not just like, oh, this sucks. Like I would never do that. Like that's not what this is. So I think people know what we're all about at this point. But Josh, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on board for this.
Well, I really would like to come back for something that I can say only nice things about, because I really hate that I come off as this Debbie Downer who's just hates everything he loves. I love a lot of things.
I don't. I mean, I'd have to go back and re-listen to the Peace on Earth episode. I don't think you came off that way. You definitely did have more critiques than I expected, given what you had shared beforehand about how much you loved it. But like it's all part of the process. And honestly, it could just be when we rewatch or like something like this for the first time. But when we rewatch and reread, it's like sometimes your reaction changes, just like depending on where you are and what else you're consuming. Like there's so much that goes around with. That's why there are certain things we've covered multiple times, because sometimes your feelings shift. It's all right. So as I mentioned before, we have another interlude in our Superboy coverage coming up next week. We're going to get into Superman House of Brainiac. So I'm excited for people to have that. And I just wanted to give an update. Our Patreon spinoff Beyond Metropolis, just in terms of some of the stuff that we've covered and will be covering. And thank you to all patrons and everyone who's been listening to those episodes. It's been fun to apply the digging for kryptonite approach to other corners of the DC universe. So we have episodes out on the Tomorrowverse line of animated movies. We will be getting to that Crisis animated trilogy here on Digging for Kryptonite. But before that, we have an episode on the movies leading up to it. We have an episode on the JLA Avengers crossover, the unaired Aquaman pilot from the producers of Smallville starring Justin Hartley, Mark Waid's stories on World's Finest Teen Titans and the Shazam series. Our most recent episode is on Heroes in Crisis. And then coming up, we'll have an episode on Batman Caped Crusader, the new animated series that's coming out on Amazon Prime. So a lot of fun stuff. I hope people will check it out. And again, come back here next week for our House of Brainiac discussion. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.